Hey guys, tonight we're stepping back to an era where queens avoided baths. Perfume concealed decay, and a royal smile could spoil your appetite. Elizabeth I wasn't just a ruler, she was a walking performance. Beneath the jewels and powdered perfection was a woman terrified of water and obsessed with image. Hygiene wasn't about health, it was pure theatre, from brushing teeth with sugar to turning blackened teeth into fashion statements. You'd struggle to last a single day at her court. So, before we begin, take a moment to like and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do. Now dim the lights, get comfortable, and let's ease into tonight's story together. Among the most legendary figures in English history, and perhaps the entire world, very few have left behind a legacy as fascinating and unforgettable as Queen Elizabeth I. She was far more than just a powerful ruler, an exceptionally clever strategist, or a woman who fiercely protected her throne for an impressive 44 years in a world completely dominated by men. Elizabeth I was also famously known as the central figure in some of the most peculiar, even disturbing stories ever shared regarding personal hygiene. It may sound bizarre initially, but once you uncover that, she brushed her teeth with sugar, refused to bathe for months, and transformed her own decaying teeth into a fashionable trend. You'll quickly understand why we're dedicating an entire sleepy evening to her uniquely clean habits. And just to be clear, we're not talking about the questionable beauty rituals of your great-aunt or eccentric neighbour. This is Queen Elizabeth I, daughter of the notorious King Henry VIII and the tragic Anne Boleyn, her mother, who met a chilling end when she was beheaded for alleged treason. Born into a turbulent period, Elizabeth ascended to a throne shrouded in chaos, fear, and suspicion. King Henry VIII. Her father, there was a powerful yet volatile monarch, infamous for his 6 marriages and ruthless pursuit of a male heir. Her mother, Anne Boleyn, was charismatic, intelligent, yet ultimately a victim of court intrigue, leaving Elizabeth motherless at the tender age of 3. Her early childhood was anything but ordinary. As a toddler, Elizabeth was placed under the care of noble households, where wet nurses and governesses ensured her. Every move was observed and moulded to reflect royal decorum. Despite the grandeur of her surroundings, her life was lonely, controlled, and deeply political. Cleanliness, as we understand it today, was far from a priority, but appearances were. She was often dressed in stiff brocade gowns, her skin dabbed with sweet-smelling oils, not because she was particularly tidy, but because it was crucial that the child of a queen appeared pristine. Servants were instructed to maintain her image, often powdering her skin or spritzing herbal waters around her room. If young Elizabeth skipped a wash, no one mentioned it aloud. If she disliked bathing, a common enough attitude at the time, her caretakers simply doubled the lavender. In many ways, the illusion began early. She quickly learned that image was everything. A clean shift, a perfumed collar, a braided crown of hair. These weren't just trappings of childhood, but tools of survival. Elizabeth spent time in households where her every gesture was political capital. At age 4, she reportedly had her own miniature court staff. By the time she was 6, she could already read Latin. By 10, she could converse in multiple languages and present herself with poise and precision in front of nobles twice her age. Yet behind the courtly polish was a girl who had internalized a dangerous truth to survive. She could never appear weak, disheveled, or out of control. She carried this lesson throughout her life. The chaos of her parents' legacy taught her early that safety depended not on truth, but on perception. The daughter of a beheaded queen and a mercurial king could not afford to be real. She had to be radiant, immaculate, untouchable. This tumultuous start profoundly shaped Elizabeth, who emerged from uncertainty and tragedy to transform England into a dominant world power. Elizabeth's reign witnessed historic triumphs, such as the crushing defeat of the formidable Spanish Armada, the firm defense of Protestantism, and an era of unprecedented cultural flourishing all, while she ruled with extraordinary intelligence, uncompromising determination, and a meticulously controlled public image. However, Elizabeth's impeccable appearance was not derived from soap and water. Instead, it relied on layers of lead-based face paint, lips painted with toxic mercury-based red pigments, and a delicate application of perfumed rosewater. Elizabeth was not truly cleansed. She was carefully choreographed. To maintain her throne in a patriarchal society, she understood she had to evolve beyond being just a queen. She had to become a living myth. And this myth needed to smell not like humanity, but like lavender and roses. She took great pride in calling herself the Virgin Queen, a title as revered as it was fraught with intense pressure. It implied that no imperfections, not even the slightest trace of human reality such as body odor, aging, or sweat, could be permitted to disrupt her carefully crafted image. If just a single drop of perspiration exposed her humanity, the illusion she fought so hard to build would instantly collapse. Consequently, she turned personal hygiene into a form of art, not through conventional means of bathing or cleanliness, but through an unwavering belief system, a belief that water could induce illness, perfume was sufficient to conceal decay, and smelling good enough would silence even the harshest critics. Why highlight her 7 most peculiar hygiene habits? Because these habits weren't merely strange, amusing, or shocking. They encapsulated an entire historical era. In the 16th century, hygiene was not about eliminating germs, but masking odors. Washing hands was optional, while wearing scented gloves became crucial, driven by an overwhelming fear of losing control and power. Elizabeth I took these social norms to astonishing extremes, transforming unpleasant odors into myths, tooth decay into high fashion, and ultimately, her own body into something sacred, invulnerable even to the passage of time itself. Imagine a woman who never bathed, not once, not ever. Instead, every morning, she was delicately dabbed by her maids with cloths soaked in rosewater, herbal infusions, and scented vinegar. No soap, no steam, no running water, just soft presses against her skin, more ceremony than cleanliness. Queen Elizabeth I believed that bathing could open the body to illness, that water carried disease, and that perfume could protect where hygiene could not. So she stayed dry, perfectly dry, her body, wrapped in brocade and silk, rarely touched water, but it touched layers of scent. Lavender, rosemary, and spiced oils clung to her like a cloud. When the smell of her unwashed body crept through, more perfume was added. Her gowns were never washed, only perfumed. Her undergarments changed daily, but her skin, it hadn't truly been cleaned in weeks, sometimes months. That might sound grotesque, but under the strangeness lies a profound fear of being exposed, of being ordinary, of being mortal. For Elizabeth, filth could be hidden, but weakness could not. A body that smelled sweet, she believed, would never be questioned. She didn't need to be clean. She only needed to appear divine. That's why tonight, we begin our journey not with soap and water, but with scent and illusion. We'll explore 7 of Queen Elizabeth I's most disturbing hygiene rituals, not to mock her, but to understand the lengths she went to keep her myth alive. When fragrance replaces bathing, and belief replaces fact, we begin to see. Maintaining the illusion was perhaps the hardest part of ruling an empire. So, are you ready to step behind the royal curtain? No bathtubs, no plumbing, just secret chevally perfumed, rarely washed, and strangely unforgettable. And it all begins with the Queen's most fragrant deception. She never bathed. Disturbing habit 1. Never bathed, only dabbed with perfumed water and vinegar. Have you ever gone a week without taking a bath? A month? Or an entire summer? If that thought makes your skin crawl, then imagine this. Queen Elizabeth I, ultimate symbol of power, intellect, and beauty during England's golden age, lived nearly her entire life without ever touching bath water. Yes, you heard that right? No showers, no bathtubs, no steamy, rose-scented baths, like in period dramas. Instead, she embraced an entirely different method of cleansing, being gently dabbed by her maids with soft cloths soaked in rosewater, apple cider vinegar, and rare herbs. It was a ritual saturated with fragrance, not with actual cleanliness. And the strange part? She believed in it completely. Let's rewind a bit. In the 16th century, bathing wasn't exactly fashionable. Many believed water carried harmful vapors and invisible diseases. Soaking your body in it was thought to open the door to illness. Elizabeth, obsessed with control and appearances, refused to let that happen. So what did she do to stay clean? She changed her undergarments frequently. Thin linen shifts were swapped out 3 or 4 times a day. Not because she sweated excessively, but because people believed linen could absorb dirt and toxins from the skin. No need to wash the body, just change the clothes. Sounds convenient. Doesn't it? But don't be fooled. Imagine a sweltering summer's day, inside a thick-walled stone palace, with no air conditioning, no fans, and no open windows. She wore up to 3 layers of dresses, a corset, and several layers of linen underneath. Bathing? Absolutely not. Scent would handle that. Elizabeth had an entire arsenal of fragrances: rosewater, lavender oil, vinegar steeped in herbs, herbal tinctures, and countless aromatic powders. Her gloves were soaked in perfumes. Her cloaks were sprayed with orange blossom and sandalwood. Even her handkerchiefs were stored in cedarwood chests, so that each time she pulled one out, it carried a lingering, luxurious scent. A foreign visitor once wrote, "When she entered the room, it felt as though a Mediterranean garden had just passed by." Sounds romantic, doesn't it? But let's not forget no one ever watered that garden. If an ordinary person lived like this, they'd probably be labelled lazy. But Elizabeth was no ordinary woman. She was a legend, and legends don't sweat. Don't soak they. Simply dab on rose petals and vinegar, and convince the entire court it's enough. What's fascinating is that no one dared to question it. No one had the courage to ask, "Your Majesty, when was your last bath?" Because in her world, fragrance equaled purity. If you smelled like roses, you were clean. Simple as that. Of course, sometimes fragrance wasn't quite enough. The maids would quietly increase the dose. The thick stone walls would absorb the smell, and occasionally, the truth would still sneak through the folds of fabric, the layers of powder, and the velvet drapes, but no one spoke of it. In the royal court, truth was fragile and dangerous. Elizabeth understood this, and she perfected it into an art form. Never bathing wasn't a sign of neglect, it was a calculated choice. A method of control, a way to appear godlike in a world that demanded perfection. No blemishes, no fatigue, no trace of human messiness. And isn't it ironic? A queen who ruled an empire, defeated the Spanish Armada, preserved religious stability, and elevated English. Culture was more afraid of water than of war. But perhaps that very fear of imperfection, of being seen as mortalis, what made her into Elizabeth the Great? Not just a monarch, but a living symbol. So, as we begin our journey through the 7 most bizarre hygiene habits of Queen Elizabeth I, there's no better place to start than here. She never bathed, not because she didn't want to be clean, but because in her world of power, fragrance could replace water. And perfection, even if it was an illusion, was more powerful than the truth. And who knows? The next time you skip a shower and just spray on perfume, Maybe you're walking in the footsteps of a legend. Just remember, Elizabeth had an entire kingdom to hide behind. You might want to stay home. Disturbing habit 2. Brushing her teeth with sugar. If you've ever felt guilty for eating too many sweets in a day, don't worry. You've at least never used sugar to brush your teeth. Yes, that's right. In the grandeur of 16th century English court life, where power was measured in the number of ribbons on a dress and the paleness of one's complexion, something nearly unimaginable became a reality. Queen Elizabeth I used sugar to clean her teeth. Not honey. Not mint leaves. Sugartha. Very thing we now blame for cavities was, in her time, the ultimate symbol of luxury and nobility. Sugar was as precious as gold, reserved for the elite. The more you consumed, the more admired you became. For Elizabeth, sugar wasn't just a flavor. It was a statement. She adored it in every form. Candied fruit, sugar-coated flowers, cakes, marzipan, even violet petals steeped in syrup. The royal court was like one endless dessert buffet, where everything gleamed with sweetness, and the price was quietly paid inside her mouth. Toothpaste didn't exist back then. Toothbrushes weren't common either. So, dental hygiene became a kind of creative and dangerous experiment. The Queen had her attendants grind together crushed seashells, eggshells, charcoal, tree roots and, yes, sugar to create a gritty tooth cleaning powder. Each morning, she'd use a cloth dipped in this mixture to scrub her teeth. And that was it, clean teeth. Questionable breath. The terrifying part? That mixture was like sandpaper. It wore down her enamel day by day. Combine that with her high-sugar diet. No rinsing. No dental checkups. And her teeth quickly transitioned from ivory to grey. Then black. Then simply gone. Some records describe her breath as so foul that courtiers had to lean away when she spoke. One even whispered, "I couldn't hear Her Majesty's words, for I couldn't bear to be near her mouth." A scene both amusing and a little sad. And yet, Elizabeth the iron-willed monarch was unfazed. She absolutely refused to have her teeth pulled. Terrified of the pain. Once, a loyal courtier even had a tooth extracted in front of her, hoping to prove it wasn't so bad. But the Queen simply smiled, with half a remaining smile. Then, something strange happened, like everything else around Elizabeth. When she appeared with blackened, broken teeth and breath that could end negotiations, the ladies at court didn't recoil. They copied her. Noble women began staining their own teeth with soot, candle smoke, or iron powder to imitate the Queen's appearance. Why? Because if the Queen had black teeth, then black teeth were beautiful. And so, a feature most would consider embarrassing became fashionable. A decaying smile became a standard of elegance. It's truly astonishing how one woman could make a kingdom fall in love with tooth decay. But that was Elizabeth. She didn't rule with just swords and decrees. She ruled with image, even with rotting teeth and poisoned breath. She remained a legend draped in velvet, mercury-red lips, and relentless pride. So this second disturbing habit of Elizabeth's isn't just about brushing with sugar. It's a testament to the power of perception, the ability to turn flaws into fashion. And if you're ever feeling bad for missing a dentist appointment, just remember that the greatest queen in English history once believed that cavities were classy, and bad breath was no big deal. As long as you looked like a legend. Terrifying habit 3, never washed her clothes. Only scented them. Imagine wearing the same thick gown for weeks, layers of silk, velvet, lace, gold embroidery, lined with fox fur and never washing it. Now imagine doing that while running an empire. Sounds unbelievable? Not if you're Queen Elizabeth I. Because she didn't believe in washing clothes, not out of laziness, but because her gowns adorned with pearls, stitched with gold thread, structured with whalebone, and made of imported fabrics from Italy, were far too expensive and delicate to endure scrubbing, soap, or soaking. In Elizabeth's mind, laundering them would be an insult to their perfection, so she chose another method, one that was more fragrant, more regal, and frankly, more deceiving, stenting. When a dress began to share its feelings, Elizabeth didn't send it to be cleaned. She infused it with every luxury scent available: lavender oil, rosewater, amber, musk, orange peel, tree resin, even violet petals. Her garments were hung above trays of glowing coals, over which these fragrant oils simmered. No stains were removably hidden under clouds of scent. And strangely enough, it worked, at least in the court. When the Queen entered a room, no one said, "She smells clean," they whispered. "She smells like a dream." And that was enough to keep the legend intact. Because Elizabeth's clothes weren't just fabric, they were aura, a barrier between her and the rawness of reality. They were the fragrance of power. There's even an amusing tale about one of her favourite cloaks, deep crimson velvet, trimmed with white ermine, which she wore again and again over a few months. Never washed, only relentlessly perfumed. One courtier later wrote, "It felt as though I'd been embraced by a garden, long forgotten by its gardener." End 4. But no one dared complain. Because in Elizabeth's world, the stronger the perfume, the greater the power, and who would question power? Of course, there were limits to what fragrance could conceal. Sweat still seeped through the layers of silk. Her body still left traces, but instead of cleaning the dress, it was rested, hung in a private scenting chamber beside bundles of orange blossoms and jasmine. When she wore it again, it was described as refreshed, not washed, because washing was far too common. She didn't want to be clean. She wanted to be immortal. Cleanliness faders, but scentliness. Elizabeth understood that to be remembered, you didn't have to be clean, you had to be evocative. And if that evocation smelled like sandalwood and rose petals, all the better. So this no laundry habit wasn't just a quirk, it was a masterclass in branding. Her wardrobe wasn't just clothing, it was symbolism. A perfumed shell, hiding a tired, sweating, very human woman beneath. And if you think this sounds too distant from real life, think back to the last time you pulled a shirt out of your laundry basket, gave it a sniff, and thought, "Eh? One more day won't hurt." Congratulations, you've just had a royal moment. Just remember, Elizabeth had an entire court to spritz her with perfume. You might want to find your washing machine. I am. Terrifying habit 4. Never washed her face or hair. Have you ever felt that sweet relief after taking off your makeup at the end of a long day? Or the refreshing joy of lathering your scalp with lavender-scented shampoo under a warm shower? If so, I'm sorry you won't find any of that in Queen Elizabeth I's palace. Because, well, she didn't do those things. No face washing, no hair washing, no water, no soap, not a single drop of water touching her cheeks or scalp for years on end. And strangely enough, that was royal protocol. Why, you ask? The short answer, lead, egg whites, and fear. Elizabeth didn't just wear makeup. She constructed a face, a royal mask sculpted from white lead paste that gave her a porcelain-like glow. Her cheeks were blushed with mercury-based pigments, her lips painted with poisonous vermilion, and the whole look sealed in with rosewater or fragrant powders. It was a flawless face, but no longer human skin. Washing it? Unthinkable. To remove it would be to reveal the truth. And in Elizabeth's world, truth had no place on the face of a living legend. And what about her hair? This is where it gets fascinating. Her hair wasn't groomed with shampoo. but with beaten egg whites. Yes, you heard that right. Egg whites were used to give her hair shine, shape, and stiffness. Add in floral powders, scented oils, and orange blossom essence. And you had a Tudor-era hairspray organic, a little sticky, and just a bit fishy. Early on, Elizabeth had thick, reddish gold loxa prized inheritance from her mother. Anibeline. But years of being smothered in metal, chemical pigments, and never washed, took their toll. Her hair began to fall out. Her scalp became irritated. Eventually, she resorted to wigs. These weren't ordinary wigs. They were masterworks crafted from real human hair. Dyed, vibrant auburn, curled into elaborate patterns, and sometimes adorned with dried flowers or tiny pearls. Every appearance was a performance, and no one knew the damaged terrain hiding beneath. And did you notice? Water never enters the scene. No rinsing. No scrubbing. No morning splash of cold refreshment. Water was dangerous, extravagant, and unreliable. One of her attendants once wrote, "Each morning, her ladies-in-waiting dabbed her face with soft cloths soaked in scented water. No rubbing, no wiping, just dabbing. It was less like skincare, more like tending to a wax statue." Which makes you wonder, did Elizabeth ever feel her own skin? Did she ever long, in some quiet moment, to wash everything off? Or was the fear of being truly seen more powerful than the desire to feel clean? Because to Elizabeth, her face wasn't just a face, it was a second crown. Her hair wasn't just hair, it was a moving throne. And imperfection a wrinkle, a blemish. A strand of thinning hair could be political ammunition. So, she made sacrifices. She gave up real skin, real hair, real sensation. In exchange for a myth, a mask of eternal whiteness, ageless, waterless, unreal but undefeated. And if you think this sounds extreme, remember the last time you threw on another layer of powder instead of washing your face, or tied up your hair on a non-wash day. Sometimes, we all choose to look fine rather than be real. Oh, the only difference? Elizabeth had an empire to uphold the illusion. The fifth horrifying habit, using deadly toxic makeup. By candlelight, and beneath the solemn stillness of the Tudor court, Queen Elizabeth I, I appeared like a living monument with porcelain-pale skin, sharply defined crimson lips, and a regal presence few dared to challenge. But behind that flawless facade lay a lifelong chemical tragedy. To maintain her icy, porcelain-like appearance, Elizabeth placed absolute trust in a fashionable cosmetic of the time, Venetian cerusia, strange blend of white lead powder and vinegar, applied across her face like a foundation. This product was popular among European nobility for its incredible coverage, erasing scars, freckles, and any signs of illness. But for Elizabeth, it was more than just makeup. It was a mask, a shield that kept her on the highest pedestal, untouchable and above scrutiny. After a severe bout of smallpox in 1562, Elizabeth was left with facial scarring, marking the beginning of her reliance on cosmetics. Each morning, a careful layer of lead was applied to her skin, creating a ghostly pallor like sculpted marble. Then came the rouge, made from cinnabara, form of red mercury. Her lip color, too, was concocted from a mercury-based formula. These elements all contributed to the creation of an immortal queenly image, while slowly poisoning her from within. Over time, the toxic substances began to take their toll. Her skin grew rough, flaky, and erupted in uncontrollable rashes. Whenever sores or inflammation appeared, she simply applied another layer of Venetian ceruse to hide and the cycle repeated, day after day. Her attendants started to notice changes in her demeanor, random fits of rage, persistent headaches, and an unusual fatigue. Today, historians believe these were clear signs of chronic lead poisoning. Still, Elizabeth never allowed that exhaustion to show. Despite the pain, she appeared before her court with meticulously painted features, her head held high, her gaze unflinching. She was the queen, and a queen could never be seen as weak, not even through a faint wrinkle or a single age spot. It wasn't just her skin that suffered. Her hair, too, paid the price. Prolonged exposure to metal-based cosmetics caused Elizabeth's hair to thin and fall out. Rather than face the truth, she chose to wear elaborate wigs made from real hair curled, dyed red, and drenched in floral scents. Each time she stood before her subjects, the wig was groomed to perfection, giving the illusion of youth and vitality, never betraying the reality hidden beneath toward the end of her life. Accounts described her natural skin as paper-thin, laced with blue veins, and flaking in patches, yet Elizabeth still clung to her leaden mask. To her, it was the final armor that kept her upright in a court filled with prying eyes and unpredictable loyalties. Perhaps the saddest truth wasn't the toxicity of the makeup, but the fact that she knew it was killing her, and still couldn't stop. Each time she applied another layer of foundation, she wasn't just covering scars or asserting dominances. He was reinforcing the myth she had built. A myth where truth was never allowed to surface. Even today, when people speak of the noble Elizabethan pale complexion, the few remember that the cost was paid in blood, in health, and in prolonged loneliness. To preserve her beauty, Elizabeth willingly poisoned herself for decades. And so, in the cold private chambers of Whitehall Palace, where sunlight never touched her real skin, Elizabeth continued to paint the perfect portrait of a woman who was never truly allowed to be herself. Gruesome habit 6. Using Pomanders instead of Hygiene. Throughout her more than 4-decade reign, Queen Elizabeth I always appeared with a composed, regal presence. So much so that no one dared breathe too loudly when she walked by. But if we could peel back the layers of fabric and dense white powder, we'd see that her flawless exterior was crafted not only with power and cosmetics, but also with scent, lingering aroma that both enchanted and overwhelmed. Often used to mask something less pleasant beneath, and in her pursuit of that untouchable image, Elizabeth relied on a small but essential weapon. The pomander, a small orb of silver or gold worn at the waist or hidden within a sleeve, filled with precious aromatic substances like ambergris, musk, resin, and cinnamon. These pomanders weren't just jewelry or luxury items, they were talismans, odor shielding charms, and a nearly mystical belief in fragrance as purity. In the 16th century, many believed disease spread through miasma, toxic, invisible vapors, often accompanied by foul odors. The logic was simple. If something smelled bad, it was likely dangerous, and conversely, a pleasant scent meant safety. For Elizabeth, obsessed with control and the appearance of immortality, a fragrant pomander provided far more comfort than any prayer or physician. Her pomanders were intricately carved, some with compartments to store different herbs for varying seasons or moods. A few were engraved with the phoenix symbol signifying rebirth, and eternity serving as a quiet proclamation that she, this queen, would not fall to disease, decay, or time. But the truth wasn't so fragrant. While the sparkling orb gave off waves of scent, beneath Elizabeth's heavy gowns, her body was steeped in sweat, powdered lead, Perfumative, and unwashed linens, body odor, mildew from layers of fabric. Even the stench of chemical burnsol of it was concealed not by soap, but by musk and amber. Ladies-in-waiting later recounted that the air in Elizabeth's private chambers could be so thick with scent that it triggered headaches. But no one dared open a window, not because Elizabeth prized privacy, but because she feared the wind, the breeze. in her view, carried illness. Pomanders, by contrast, blocked it. A simple belief, but unshakable. She took them everywhere, to her bedchambers, the dining hall, church, and diplomatic meetings. Some were clipped to her belt on silver chains. Others discreetly rolled in her silk sleeves, gently shifting between her fingers whenever tension rose. It wasn't just a habit, it was a ritual, a form of psychological armor amid a world of scheming and silence. The deeper irony was this: the more fragrance she used, the further removed she became from what we understand as hygiene today. No baths, no shampoo, no laundry, just scent. Scent meant cleanliness. Scent meant purity. Scent meant immunity. And for Elizabeth, scent was also power. Modern scholars suggest that the excessive use of aromatics may have worsened respiratory issues and compounded the effects of mercury and lead poisoning. But in an age where belief often overpowered science, Elizabeth clung to one certainty: weakness must never be seen. And if a small golden ball helped her maintain that illusion, she would hold on to it until the very end. Today, when we view portraits of Elizabeth radiating authority, we rarely notice the small detail: a golden pomander resting quietly in her palm, releasing invisible trails of fragrance. But to Elizabeth, it was her last line of defense. When her skin had peeled, her breath reeked of lead, and her lips were swollen from mercury, she still had that scent to rely on, to remain a symbol, to conceal the truth. Thus, in a world without deodorant, without bath gel, without modern hygiene, Elizabeth built herself a fragrant fortress, beautifully scented, but never truly clean. Seventh disturbing habit: turning rotting black teeth into a fashion statement. In today's world, a bright white smile is considered the pinnacle of beauty. But in Queen Elizabeth I's reign, all standards were reversed. A set of blackened, decaying, and gap-filled teeth. What would horrify us today was once a symbol of power, fashion, and, oddly enough, loyalty. You heard that right. In the 16th century, if you smiled with pearly white teeth, others might suspect you weren't aristocratic enough. It all began with Elizabeth's dietary habits. She was addicted to sugar, not just a spoonful in tea but candied fruits, sweet pastries, honeyed preserves, and don't forget, this was an era with no toothpaste, no dentists, and certainly no flossing. The result? Her teeth gradually rotted. Black replaced white. Gums receded. And her breath? No one dared describe it in detail. But instead of being seen as a sign of poor hygiene or illness, her rotting teeth became royal fashion. Why? Because only the wealthy could afford enough sugar to rot their teeth completely. And if the Queen had black teeth, then black teeth were beautiful. Some noble women even intentionally darkened their teeth with soot or wax to resemble the Queen more closely, a gesture of loyalty and fashionable devotion. It sounds absurd, but it's a perfect example of how power shapes perception. Elizabeth didn't just rule with proclamations, and Amiche ruled through image. Her chalk-white skin from poisonous lead, her flaming red wigs hiding a bald scalp. And yes, even her decaying smile, all became part of her mythos. Historical records say that when Elizabeth smiled, people could smell her teeth before hearing her words. But no one dared criticize her. On the contrary, they competed to emulate her. The aristocracy traded recipes for tooth-blackening elixirs, from burnt wood powders to herbal concoctions. None of them helped with cavities. But as long as it looked royal, it was worth the trouble. Portraits from Elizabeth's time rarely show her teeth in detail, perhaps, because artists weren't sure how to make them look attractive. But in foreign ambassadors' diaries and letters, we get more honest glimpses. One French envoy wrote, Her smile carried the flavour of metal and shadow. Whether poetic or painfully literal, the impression stuck. There's even a small anecdote. In her final years, Elizabeth rarely spoke in public, partly due to health, but also because of her teeth. She feared the public might see her weakness, her age, her truth. Instead, she chose silence or brief remarks, and often avoided smiling altogether. A queen was not supposed to appear fragile enough even through a missing tooth or a trembling lip. And that's the subtle but haunting tragedy. To preserve the myth, Elizabeth endured pain and decay. Every bite of a sweet cake was not just another cracked tooth, it was another sacrifice. A sacrifice for power, for appearance, for the legend of Elizabeth. Today, we laugh who would stain their teeth black just to appear fashionable. But imagine living in an era where your face was more than skin deep, it was your weapon. Your shield? A wrinkle, a lost tooth, a weary glance could destabilize a monarchy. Elizabeth understood this better than anyone. She had no choice. Either remain flawlessly untouchable, disappear. So, as we arrive at the final chapter of our exploration into her chilling yet mesmerizing habits, we stop laughing. We begin to understand that beneath every layer of lead powder, every perfumed wig, every rotting tooth, was a woman desperately holding together the image of a legend that was not allowed to crumble. And so, Elizabeth's black teeth are no longer repulsive. They are a symbol, a reminder of the price of power, of appearance, and of the deep fear of being seen. And now, after peeling back each layer of mystery behind Elizabeth I's glittering facade, from her lead-painted skin to her perfumed breath, from her wigs to the unwashed, sweet-scented gowns, you might be wondering, what did her daily life actually look like? How did she eat with teeth so decayed? How did she speak when her expression was frozen beneath layers of cosmetics? And most of all, in that damp, aromatic space, lit only by candlelight, was there any room left for authenticity? Let's turn back the clock. It's a winter afternoon. The sun over London fades behind a veil of milk-coloured mist. Inside Richmond Palace, dozens of hands work in quiet coordination to prepare for the most important moment of the day, the Queen's appearance. No one is allowed to see her before the transformation is complete. From here, we'll move hour by hour gently, deliberately, without her stetto, follow a day in the life of Elizabeth I, a day in which no moment is casual. Every gesture is ceremonial. Every glance is performance. And even sleep must be choreographed to the last breath. Let's begin. The light is fading, and the play is about to begin again. You open your eyes in the dim glow of a winter dawn. The sun has yet to fully rise, leaving only soft streaks of blue drifting quietly across a silvery sky. The clock strikes 5 a.m., the hour of silence, the hour of preparation. Inside Richmond Palace, no one is allowed to sleep in. Even the breaths seem hushed, as if the entire place is holding its rhythm for something sacred to begin. You step lightly on the cold stone floor, ears catching the soft sound of brushes scraping against the hearth in the main dining hall. In the eastern wing, the maids have already begun their morning ritual in silence, warming basins of herbal water to cleanse the Queen, laying out fine linen undergarments across chairs, and checking the humidity in the royal chamber, a room into which no natural light is ever allowed. In the stables, the night guards are switching shifts. You hear the subtle crunch of boots on wood and a stifled sneeze cutting through the cold. From afar, a faint scent of incense, hearth ashes, and dried apples wafts in from the already lit kitchens. You walk past long corridors where ancient portraits stare back with unblinking eyes. At the centre of the palace stands a heavy wooden door that leads into the Queen's private inner chambers, a room few have ever entered. There, Elizabeth I is still asleep. But you know, everyone knows that soon the silver bell will chime 3 times, signalling the moment of awakening. Every morning of hers begins in the dark. No open windows. No brise. Only the flicker of candlelight and the hush of whispers. One attendant tiptoes in with warm cloths soaked in rose vinegar. Another sets the blazing red wig onto a sculpting stand. Every movement is silent. As if performing a sacred rite, you watch, quietly amazed at the meticulous care. Each pleated skirt steamed until flawless. Each jar of lead-based makeup and powdered oyster shell placed delicately in a pearl-inlaid box. No water ever touches her skin, only soft cloth, fragrant vinegar, and the lingering scent of lavender. No words are spoken unless she allows it. And when the Queen opens her eyes, all present bow, and step back exactly 3 paces. At 6:15 a.m., when light has still not penetrated the thick velvet curtains, Elizabeth sits up, draped in a silk gown embroidered with golden thread. You stand there, sensing the candle's warmth, casting reflections onto a face pale as porcelain. Beneath the thick layers of powder lies exhaustion, no one dares name. Beneath the bright mercury lipstick are lips dry and cracked, but no one speaks. No one is allowed to see her differently. And so, another royal day begins. You step back, retreating behind the door, and hear a whisper, "Prepare the morning tea," and white roses for the chamber. No one knows what this day will bring. But one thing is certain. Here, every hour is a ceremony. And you, the observer, are about to witness an entire day under the shadow of a legend. 6:30 a.m. As the hour hand glides past 6, a small silver bell chimes 3 times. No one speaks. All the handmaidens silently bow and step backward, yielding the stillness of the chamber to a sacred moment. Queen Elizabeth I is waking up. You stand just behind the crimson velvet curtain, your heart gently pounding as the inner chamber door opens. The chief lady in waiting, the only one allowed to approach the Queen before she is made up, glides over to the bedside and murmurs a morning blessing. As though addressing a deity, Elizabeth opens her eyes. Her gaze sweeps across the room, as if everything in it awaits her unspoken command. There is no water for washing her face. No clean water has touched that skin in years. Instead, her attendants offer a soft linen cloth, soaked in rosewater and apple cider vinegar. The cloth is wrung just enough to leave a light moisture, then gently dabbed across her forehead, cheeks, and chin, more symbolic than truly cleansing. You watch as they repeat this ritual 3 times, each with a different fragrance: lavender, bergamot, and finally, sandalwood. These layers of scent fill the air, mingling into something unmistakable, the Queen's scent. Then comes the most important part, the makeup ritual. A cedarwood box is opened. Inside lie small silver jars, one with Venetian ceruse, white lead powder mixed with vinegar, another with red mercury blush, and another with lip stain made from liquid mercury and resins. The attendant, wearing silk gloves, dips a squirrel hair brush into the ceruse and gently pats it onto Elizabeth's face. Layer upon layer is applied, turning her skin into a pale, ghostly white, like porcelain. Her high forehead, sculpted cheekbones, and slim nose are redefined with every stroke. This isn't beauty for admiration. It's armor to maintain distance. Authority. Myth. You can't take your eyes off her. She doesn't wash her face to keep yesterday's lead layer intact. The goal is not to cleanse, but to restore, add, patch, reinforce, like one might renovate a historical monument. Her face is not for the truth. It's for display. Once the base is complete, blush is added to her cheeks. A deep red is brushed onto her lips, and a thin line of rose oil is dabbed on her temples. No words are spoken, only the soft tap of the brush and the distant whistle of wind curling around the thick stone walls. Her real hair has long disappeared. Years of mercury and harsh styling had left her bald in many places, but no one ever saw it. A freshly prepared wig is brought in real human hair, dyed flame red, perfumed with musk and sandalwood. It's placed carefully on her head like a coronation crown. Silver pins secure it. And every strand is adjusted to perfection, as if this were a sacred ceremony. By 7:15 a.m., Elizabeth raises her chin. Her gaze now is no longer that of a woman who just woke up, but that of a portrait. Flawlessly restored. Silent, cold, distant as if she had never slept or dreamed. You step back, sensing the atmosphere shift. This is no longer a bedroom. It has become the stage of a living legend. She sits there, unwashed, untouched by water, yet commands reverence with every glance. And you understand. The day officially begins now. 12 p.m. The grand clock in the east wing strikes noon. Its chimes echo through the palace like a slow, elegant announcement. It is time to dine. But this is not a meal. It is a performance, carefully orchestrated, deliciously bizarre, and at times, quietly grotesque. You are escorted into the antechamber, outside the Queen's private dining salon. The air is thick with the aroma of roasted game, cinnamon, honey-glazed fruits, and something earthier perhaps, clove-stuffed pigeon or spiced eel pie. At the center of it all, in a high-backed gilded chair carved with Tudor roses, sits Elizabeth I, her face unmoving under layers of lead makeup, her flame-red wig impeccable. But beneath the silk gloves and bejeweled rings lies a secret. Her teeth are rotting. Decades of sugar, wine, and metallic makeup have blackened them to near decay. Yet, no one dares mention it. In fact, many nobles imitate her blackened teeth, staining their own to show loyalty. In this court, decay is fashionable. A servant presents the first course. Sweet meat-scanded rose petals, sugar-coated almonds, marzipan birds so delicately crafted they look ready to fly. The Queen nibbles slowly, each bite softened not by appetite but by necessity. Her gums are sensitive, and some teeth are missing. Occasionally, you catch her covering her mouth with a lace cloth, while chewing one of the few hints that this living icon is, in fact, human. Next comes a small goblet of spiced hippocras, a wine infused with herbs and warm honey. It's more than refreshment. The Queen believes it purifies the blood, wards off illness, and warms the body. The wine is poured from a decanter that has not touched soap or water in years only, rinsed with rose water and vinegar. The table is set with silver cutlery. Though Elizabeth rarely uses it, she prefers to be served in small, kabel slices bite-sized, manageable, discreet. The dishes change daily, but the ritual does not. Before each bite, a handmaiden dabs the Queen's lips with scented cloth. After each sip, another applies a fresh layer of crimson tint. Then comes the oddest moment, the presentation of her Pomandera gold orb filled with crushed ambergris, myrrh, clove, and herbs. She gently lifts it to her nose between courses, inhaling deeply. The fragrance, she believes, shields her from disease and foul odors. This practice replaces any sense of sanitation. In the Queen's world, scent is safety, and hygiene is an illusion woven by perfume. By 12:45 p.m., the meal ends not with dessert, but with ceremony. Elizabeth dabs her lips, lifts her goblet for a final sip, and rises. No leftovers are seen. Plates are whisked away, share cleared. Crumbs brushed from her gown, though none would dare say she'd dropped anything. And just like that, the Queen glides away not to rest, but to receive foreign emissaries, discuss statecraft, and walk the razor's edge between diplomacy and dominance. Her stomach may ache, her teeth throb, her body crave water, but her legend continues. unflinching. In this palace, even lunch is an act of state. The most mysterious moment of the day, the Queen's afternoon nap. After a refined yet peculiar lunch, Elizabeth didn't retreat to read poetry or enjoy music as many would imagine. She walked slowly down velvet-lined corridors, passing half-opened windows, letting in just enough sunlight, not too harsh, not too cold. Then, the heavy door of the west resting chamber closed behind her, sealing with a dry click like a secret being locked away. The midday rest began, but no one was allowed to call it sleep. In the Tudor court, the Queen's afternoon nap was more of a ritual than a routine. Though her body was weary and her head burdened by the weight of her wig and lead makeup, Elizabeth never fully reclined. Instead, she would recline gently on a fur-padded couch, resting her head on a cushion, one hand placed delicately on her lap as if still attending court just with closed eyes. No one was allowed to see her sleep. Absolutely no one. Servants were only permitted in the room before she rested, to adjust the hearth fire, place rosemary satchels at her feet, and set a pomander near her wig knot to freshen the air, but to preserve eternity through scent. Then they would retreat silently, like shadows, careful not to let a hem swish or a heel click on the stone floor. Inside that room, silence was not peace, it was fear. It was said that once, a young maid accidentally coughed softly while passing the door and was banished from the palace forever. The reason? She disrupted Her Majesty's dream. No one knew what that dream was. No one had ever seen the Queen sleep deeply. For Elizabeth, sleep was the most vulnerable state, and she would not allow herself to be seen weak. While her eyes were closed, a handmaiden would stand guard outside, not sitting, not looking in, not even fidgeting. In her hand was a small Bible, and if anyone approached the chamber, she would whisper from it, not for Elizabeth to hear, but so that the intruder would turn away. Most notably, no one was allowed to touch her while she slept. Not even if her wig slipped or her lead powder began to crack. Any wrinkles, if they appeared, had to be left untouched, for sleep was the only time the Queen could briefly forget the gaze of the world. And yet, even in unconsciousness, she still wanted to remain an icon. A widely told court tale recounts that once, after a half-hour rest, Elizabeth opened her eyes, looked directly at a trembling maid nearby, and asked, "Did you see me sleep?" The girl collapsed into a kneel. "Stammang hier till Niel," Elizabeth smiled, then gently motioned toward the door. The girl was never seen again. It wasn't cruelty. It was preservation of an image. Elizabeth understood that the greatest power lay in mystery, and nothing was more terrifying than seeing a symbol of perfection caught in a moment of human vulnerability. Then, when the clock struck 2 p.m., like a well-wound machine, Elizabeth would open her eyes, sit upright, and lift a small bronze mirror to inspect her makeup. No washing, no wiping, just a soft touch with a piece of cloth, followed by another dusting of white powder. Nap over. No one dared to ask what she dreamed, but in her next steps, she seemed even colder, her gaze more distant as though she had wandered through a realm no one else was permitted to enter. As the afternoon light faded through the towering stained glass windows of Whitehall Palace, Queen Elizabeth I emerged from her private chamber, following her mysterious midday rest. No one ever witnessed the weariness on her face as she woke. Everything had already been choreographed like a silent resurrection. The handmaidens knocked 3 times, quietly placed a pearl-inlaid comb, a box of lead-based powder, and a sprig of fresh lavender on the vanity table, then withdrew without a sound. Elizabeth adjusted her wig, carefully reapplied the flaking makeup with steady hands, as if life itself had never dared to fracture her. Then, as though she had just completed a spell, she stepped out to sea. Regal. Flawless, so perfect, one might forget she had ever been made of flesh and blood. From 2 to 6 in the afternoon was reserved for matters of state and royal audiences. But do not imagine these were merely dry meetings. In Elizabeth's court, every afternoon was a grand stage of power and spectacle, where each step she took, each word she uttered, could determine the fate of a man, a family line, or even an entire nation. Her weekly schedule did not revolve around Monday or Sunday. It moved to its own rhythm. There were petition days, often falling on Wednesdays or Fridays, when she sat on a modest throne in the dragon chamber to receive ambassadors, nobles, and subjects. She rarely spoke much. Just one look from Elizabeth was enough to signal pardon or punishment. Sundays were for worship. When the Queen appeared in white robes at the chapel, her face stoic, as if she were not born of scripture, but written in the scrolls of law. Thursdays or Saturdays were dedicated to arts and theatrical displays. Mask night. In the great hall, musicians, boots, and actors gave their finest performances in hopes of gaining her favor. Occasionally, even in her 60s, Elizabeth would rise unexpectedly, walk to the center of the hall, and perform a slow, deliberate turn in an old courtly dance. Just one graceful spin could leave the entire court breathless. Mondays, however, were the exact opposite, known unofficially as Silent Day. No one was allowed near her chambers. There were no letters, no whispers, and no one truly knew what occurred during those hushed hours. Some said she removed her wigs. Others claimed she lay motionless by candlelight for hours. No one dared to confirm. Despite the repetition of these rituals week after week, no 2 days ever felt the same. Some afternoons, she would laugh warmly with her maids, gently teasing a musician, tuning his lute. Other days, she was cold as a marble effigy, her gaze sliding past people with such indifference that no one dared to breathe too loudly. Yet one thing remained unchanged: discipline. No one could hand a letter to her directly. Every document passed through 3 layers of scrutiny, 2 secretaries and 1 courtier. No one spoke, unless spoken to. One misplaced word could exile a nobleman from court overnight. Every sentence Elizabeth uttered was carefully recorded except her emotions. For her emotions, she never allowed anyone to possess. Occasionally, she held private tea sessions in the late afternoon, inviting only 3 to 5 trusted individuals. These gentle conversations, seemingly harmless, were in fact the most sophisticated psychological chess matches. A compliment on her gown might be interpreted as political flattery. Prolonged silence might be seen as unwavering loyalty, amid the scent of Earl Grey steeped with chamomile. Every gesture, every smile, was a veiled test. As the final rays of sunlight filtered through the coloured glass, Elizabeth would often walk alone to the western corridor. Overlooking the garden of carnations and crimson roses, she never touched the flowers, only stood still, gazing, as if recalling something long lost, or calculating something very near. Some said it was her only moment of vulnerability. Others believed it was when she wrote the script for the night ahead who would be received, who would be forgotten, and who would disappear. Because in this palace, everything could change except for one truth. Elizabeth's afternoons were never the quiet remnants of a day. They were the overture to an evening of precision, spectacle, and invisible command. And that was only the middle of a day in the life of the Virgin Queen. The evening still waited, where behind closed doors, far more would be revealed than daylight ever allowed. As the last rays of sunlight withdrew from the cold stone walls, the entire Whitehall Palace sank into a half-silent state. It was the twilight hour, when state affairs ceased. Performances ended, and the Queen-like, a living wax statue, began her transition into the night version of herself. There was no bath, no sound of running water, no scent of soap. The only cleansing at this time resembled a religious ritual infused with theatrical flair and a deep obsession with control. The maids entered the room, carrying silver trays, holding vials of specially prepared perfumes, vinegar infused with herbs, Persian rosewater, ambergris oil, and a few dried jasmine petals. They said nothing, merely set the bottles gently on the dressing table, and began to remove the queen's heavy garments like peeling away the outer shell of a sole. The outer robe was hung on a mahogany stand, turned inside out to be aired with fragrance. The main gown, never washed, was dusted with scented powder, made from ground iris root and fine ash. Handkerchiefs, stockings, gloves, everything was treated with fragrance instead of water, and Elizabeth herself was purified using dry steam, a small porcelain burner heated from below, releasing a scented smoke of herbal oils believed to ward off evil spirits, cleanse impurities, and mask the odor of the body. She sat there, spine straight like a deity, eyes half closed. No one dared to look directly. A maid, with a silk cloth moistened in oil, gently wiped her wrists, the nape of her neck, and behind her ears places that needed to be refreshed after a long day without a single drop of sweat. For the heavy makeup and layered clothing had already absorbed all signs of real life. There was a very specific kind of silence in Elizabeth's room at this hour, not the silence of sleep, but the hush of a scene change in a grand theatre. Every movement was quiet, repeated with absolute precision each day, as if the entire world might collapse if even one step were missed. Then, the daytime wig was removed and replaced with another, also red, also curled, but scented with a gentler lavender, less powdered, more sleep-friendly. Her face was touched up with a thin layer of white lead powder not to sleep in, but in case anyone saw her in the middle of the night, they would still see a perfect queen. Elizabeth never allowed her real skin to be seen, not even in someone else's dreams. A light supper was served at dusk, usually barley porridge, or bread spread with honey, a few slices of dried fruit, and a glass of herb-infused wine to aid sleep. But she rarely finished it. Some nights, she merely sat staring at the plate, hand clutching her string of pearls, as if counting the mistakes of her reign. At last, when everything was once again in order, Elizabeth rose and walked toward the door that led to the innermost room, her private bedchamber, where no one was allowed to enter. No guards, no ladies in waiting, just a solid oak door closing behind her, keeping within it a mystery perhaps no one in England ever truly touched. And so, another day passed. No water, no soap, only fragrance and silence enveloping a body long weary, yet fiercely unwilling to unravel. She didn't need to be clean. She needed to be queen every second, every minute, even when no one was watching. And in that world of artificial rose scents and unwashed fabrics, Elizabeth continued to cling to the throne, even when all that remained was perfume. As the seventh chime echoed through the royal palace, night officially descended upon the vaulted ceilings of Whitehall. Beyond the stained glass windows, the shadows draped themselves over the rose gardens, as if nature itself had been ordered to fall silent. Inside the palace, the soft golden glow of dozens of beeswax candles illuminated the cold stone walls and the faint gold embroidery along the sleeping gown already prepared for Elizabeth. No more murmuring envoys, no more noble footsteps in the corridors, only a quietude, so deliberate it wasn't exhaustion, but the whole world pausing for a singular moment, the exact hour when the Virgin Queen would withdraw from the stage of the world. Elizabeth I's dinner was always a ritual, never merely a meal. A small rosewood table was placed near the eastern window, where she could quietly gaze into the darkness, blanketing her gardens. On the table, a bowl of oat porridge infused with rosewater, a few slices of dried pear, a piece of dark bread spread with honey, and a warm glass of herb-infused wine all arranged with meticulous care. She dined alone. No one dared speak. A loyal, elderly maid stood 2 paces away, holding a fan of swan feathers, gently fanning in rhythm with each spoonful as if even the air around her could not be wasted. In a far shadowward corner, a musician plucked her favourite lute-tunia folk melody from her days imprisoned at Woodstock. No one ever mentioned that chapter. Yet the melody returned each night like a whisper from a past that never truly vanished. Elizabeth rarely finished her meal. On some nights, she only sipped her wine, staring long into silence. Her fingers wrapped around the string of pearls at her neck, a symbol of purity, and perhaps the burden she bore her entire life. No one could guess her thoughts. But those eyes that had once stared down the cannons of Spain and made Parliament bow now gazed quietly, reflecting a weight no crown could ease. After dinner came a short retreat to her private library, not to read, but to complete the final rituals of a queen who would never allow herself to unravel. This room was lit with amber oil lamps, its air steeped in jasmine and sandalwood, as if the space itself had been bathed in memory. Here, she would glance over selected letters, sometimes only brushing her fingers across the parchment, as if sensing the sender across time and distance. Every motion was slow, precise, unchanging. A lady-in-waiting helped her into her nightgown, a pale, ash-pink silk robe embroidered with golden thread, so light it seemed unreal. The daytime wig was removed and replaced with another still auburn, still curled, but smoother, scented with lavender. Sleep-friendlier, her lead makeup was reapplied lightly, not for sleep, but in case someone, even a wandering spirit, might glimpse her at midnight and still behold a perfect queen. Elizabeth never allowed her bare skin to be seen, not even in the dreams of others. Finally, she rose. A maid opened the door leading to her innermost chamber, the private sleeping room that no one else was permitted to enter. No guards, no attendants, no one. As the heavy oak door shut, the world outside could only stand still, keeping watch over a symbol who continued playing her partivan in the dark. No water, no soap, no rumpled sheets or sunken pillows, only the scent of artificial roses, the crisp air, and the deadly perfection wrapped around her like a veil. Elizabeth didn't need to be clean. She needed to be unchanging. She needed to be the queen every second, every minute, even when no one was watching. And then, night in the palace. When the bedroom door closed, the entire world outside seemed to hold its breath. The darkness inside Elizabeth I's private chambers wasn't cold, it was so silent. You could hear time breathing. The last candles flickered out in the hall, casting lonely glimmers on the marble floors. Inside, the queen lay on a towering oak bed, draped in red silk and velvet curtains embroidered with gold thread. No one was allowed to witness her sleep. No servants, no guards, no whispered good nights. In solitude, Elizabeth closed her eyes like a goddess who had completed her day's divine duty without tears, without mistakes, without weakness. Her sleep wasn't like ordinary people's. It didn't come gently like falling rain, but was a half-conscious state where her mind stayed alert to every gust of wind, every distant footstep. Perhaps this was the cost of power even in dreams. One is not permitted to let go. No one knew what she dreamed of. Some whispered that the queen never truly slept, that each night she only closed her eyes, remained still, kept her breath steady, and let her body rest while her mind stayed awake with England. Whatever the truth may be, it was in that private stillness that her immortal image was preserved night after night, endlessly. And so, another day in the life of Elizabeth, I came to a closer not with soap, nor with water, nor even a moment of being herself. But because of that, she endured as a legend sharp up, flawless, and forever the queen. Now, it's time for you to close your eyes, relax, and drift into your own dreams. If you enjoyed this story strange, haunting, and a little magic-alden, forget to subscribe to our channel so you won't miss any of our latest and most fascinating videos. We wish you a peaceful, gentle sleep, like velvet curtains falling at the end of the day. See you again on our next historical journey. Ciao.